You're listening to the Power Agent Blogcast, empowering agents to elevate their business to the next level.
Challenges are just a guide, leading you, don't run and hide. You've got the heart, you've got the drive, feel it pound, you're alive. Power Agent.
You know that feeling when you walk into like a massive glittering casino?
Oh, yeah. The flashing lights, the noise.
Exactly. The lights are flashing. The carpets have that deliberately disorienting pattern, and everyone in a uniform is just smiling at you.
Right. They're offering you complimentary drinks, calling you sir or ma'am.
Yeah, and on the surface, you feel like you're the most important person in the room, but in the back of your mind, despite all the friendly faces, you just, you know the game is fundamentally rigged against you.
Because the house always wins.
Right. The entire structure is built to extract your money while making you feel good about it.
Yeah, the architecture, the lack of clocks, psychological pacing of the games. I mean, it is all engineered down to the molecular level to ensure the institution maintains the advantage.
So imagine walking into that casino, but instead of sitting down to play a casual hand of blackjack, you are trying to achieve a fundamental piece of the American dream.
You're trying to buy a house?
Yes, exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive, and if you are sitting in with us today, you are about to hear us tear into a massive glaring paradox in the housing market.
It is a big one.
It really is. Today, we're unpacking a comprehensive industry guide. It's titled The Trust Gap, Bridging Real Estate to New Generations. And our mission here is to figure out why millennials and Gen Z are, frankly, terrified of buying homes.
Even though they desperately want them.
Exactly. And more importantly, we are going to look at the mechanics of how the entire real estate industry is being forced to completely overhaul its traditional playbook just to survive this demographic shift.
It's a fascinating dynamic to watch unfold, honestly. We're going to explore the underlying psychology driving these buyers, the brutal financial math they are up against.
The math is so brutal.
It really is. And we'll look at the surprising, highly technical new ways younger generations are hacking the housing market. I mean, it is a complete paradigm shift from how previous generations operated.
Okay, let's unpack this. The paradox here is startling because, on one hand, the desire to buy is just off the charts.
Oh, absolutely.
Like 96% of millennials say homeownership is a top priority, and 61% of Gen Z plans to purchase within the year.
So they desperately want to enter the market.
Right. But the trust, it is completely shattered. Get this, only 19.5% of these buyers trust loan officers.
Wow.
Yeah, and just 33% trust real estate agents. Wait, I'm stuck on this 19.5% trust rate for loan officers.
It's a staggering number.
Are buyers really that inherently cynical? Or are we just looking at a generation that prefers, like, interacting with software algorithms rather than human beings?
Well, it's easy to write them off as just being antisocial, or overly reliant on technology.
Sure.
But the data points to a much deeper, completely rational defense mechanism. If you are listening to this and you bought your first house in, say, 1995, you might be thinking these younger buyers are just overly sensitive.
Right, like they just need to toughen up.
Exactly. But you have to look at the historical baggage they're dragging into the open house. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the millennial sitting across the desk from a real estate agent today was likely a teenager or young adult during the 2008 housing crash.
Oh, man. They watched the entire global economy nearly collapse because of subprime mortgages.
Precisely. They watched their parents or, their friends' parents lose their childhood homes. They saw banks get bailed out while families went bankrupt.
Yeah.
Then they graduated into a job market that was completely shredded by a global pandemic.
Which is just awful timing.
And for their entire adult lives, they have watched housing prices outpace their wage growth by staggering margins.
So the low trust numbers are not a personal attack on any individual real estate agent.
Not at all. This lack of trust is the accumulated residue of an entire generation's experience with institutions that utterly failed them.
That makes so much sense. It feels a bit like adopting a rescue dog, right? Like, if they flinch when you reach out, it's not your fault as the new owner, but it is entirely your reality to deal with.
That is a brilliant way to put it. They don't trust the loan officer because they view the loan officer as an extension of the same banking system that caused the 2008 crash. The desire to own a home isn't the problem here.
It's the fear.
Exactly. The fear of being financially ruined by the process is the problem.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because of that deep-seated fear, they are approaching the actual transaction like a covert espionage operation.
Oh, entirely. They are displaying highly defensive behaviors that must just be maddening for traditional real estate professionals.
Yeah, you've got buyers sitting in meetings, nodding politely at the agent, while secretly fact-checking every single claim the agent makes on their phones right under the table.
It's a highly defensive posture. They are essentially running real-time audits on the professional they hired.
And it goes much deeper than that, too. They're turning to AI, like ChatGPT, to ask the questions they are too intimidated to ask a human being.
Yeah, or they are binging hours of YouTube videos.
Right.
And scouring hyper-specific Reddit threads to do their own research before they even consider making a phone call to a professional.
So if a buyer asks an agent the exact same question 3 times, they aren't suffering from memory loss.
No, they are cross-referencing the agent's answer against what the internet told them, trying to see if the story changes.
But wait, if they're consulting ChatGPT mid-meeting, aren't they basically trying to replace the agent? It feels exactly like a patient aggressively WebMDing their symptoms right in front of their doctor and demanding different tests.
It absolutely feels that way to the professional, which is why so many real estate agents get defensive and try to shut it down.
Right. Nobody likes being second-guessed like that.
Exactly. But we have to reframe the mechanics of what is actually happening. When a patient uses WebMD or, a buyer uses ChatGPT, they aren't necessarily trying to replace the expert.
Okay, then what are they doing?
They are trying to protect themselves from being taken advantage of because they feel fundamentally vulnerable. For this generation, a slow text reply from an agent or a confusing, dense legal document doesn't just mean a minor inconvenience.
That's like a red flag.
It's a massive red flag. It actively confirms a worst-case scenario they already had playing in their heads. It proves their internal narrative that the system is opaque, deliberately confusing, and out to extract their wealth.
So the silence or the confusion is basically validating their paranoia?
Precisely. And this is where the industry has to pivot. Agents absolutely must acknowledge and validate this outside research instead of dismissing it.
Because when an agent rolls their eyes and says, oh, don't listen to the armchair experts on Reddit.
Right. They are dismissing the buyer's effort to protect themselves. It feels like condescension.
Which just breaks the trust even more.
Exactly. But when an agent leans in and says, hey, I see you've been doing your homework on this. What did you find? They validate the anxiety.
Oh, wow. Taking that DIY research seriously, rather than viewing it as an insult to their professional expertise, becomes a very first step in rebuilding trust.
That is the crucial first step.
But that WebMD-style paranoia isn't just driven by past trauma or psychological fear.
No, not at all.
Right. If you look at the raw math of a mortgage today, they literally cannot afford to make a single mistake. The financial data proves that these younger buyers are running a much, much harder race than their parents did.
The math is just brutal.
So what does this all mean? Let's look at the timeline. In 1980, the average age of a first-time home buyer was 29.
And today, the average first-time buyer is 38 years old.
38. That is nearly a full decade of delayed life milestones. I mean, delayed family planning, delayed wealth accumulation.
Yeah, and the overall ownership rates reflect the brutal reality of that delay. Homeownership for people in their mid-30s currently sits at 57%.
Okay.
And when their parents were that exact same age, it was 64%. The underlying math of the economy has fundamentally shifted away from them.
This forces them into these multiplayer market hacks. Because the math is so unforgiving, buyers are throwing the traditional playbook right out the window.
They have to. They don't have a choice.
Right. So 42% of these younger buyers are open to purchasing fixer-uppers, taking on massive renovation risks just to get a foot in the door.
Yep.
And 19% are explicitly planning to rent out a room immediately just to help cover the monthly mortgage payment. Plus, Gen Z is flooding into FHA loans at record rates, utilizing them as a primary entry point.
Well, let's pause on FHA loans for a second, because understanding the mechanics here is a huge indicator of this behavioral shift.
Okay, let's break that down.
An FHA loan isn't just a generic mortgage. It's backed by the Federal Housing Administration, which means a buyer can put down as little as 3.5% instead of the traditional 20%.
That sounds like a great deal, though.
It helps with the upfront cost, sure. But the catch is substantial. You have to pay ongoing mortgage insurance premiums, and the property has to pass much stricter appraisals for safety and habitability.
Right, so why are they flooding into these specific loans?
Because pulling together a traditional 20% down payment on a $400,000 starter home while simultaneously paying record high rent is mathematically impossible for most of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They are willing to take on the extra insurance premiums just to escape the rent cycle.
That makes the reality so much clearer, but the statistic that truly highlights how different things are is this one.
Oh, I know which one you're going to say.
It's wild. 21% of these buyers are exploring co-buying with a friend or a sibling.
Yeah, 1 in 5.
If someone comes into a real estate office wanting to split a 30-year mortgage with their college roommate or their sister, I mean, is the traditional white picket fence dream dead? Or is it just evolving into something entirely new?
What's fascinating here is that the real estate industry still often views these arrangements as like exotic fringe strategies.
Right.
But the data shows us they're rapidly becoming the new normal.
Yeah.
It is less like buying a traditional family home and much more like structuring a corporate merger.
A corporate merger. Wow.
Yeah, think about it. When two friends buy a house together, you aren't just picking out curtains. You're drafting complex exit clauses in case one friend wants to sell their shares in 5 years.
Oh, right. Because they aren't married.
Exactly. You have to figure out the legal mechanics of how to handle repairs if the roof caves in. Who pays? In what percentage? What happens if one person loses their job?
So real estate agents are suddenly having to facilitate legal business partnerships rather than just showing a house with a nice backyard.
Exactly. And if an agent judges this,
Yeah, if they subtly roll their eyes at two friends trying to buy a 3-bedroom house together.
they lose the client instantly. If an agent hesitates or treats a co-buying arrangement as a bizarre hassle, that agent instantly proves they are out of touch with the modern economic reality.
Yeah, so true.
The most powerful thing an agent can do is speak the financial difficulty out loud. The guide explicitly suggests telling the buyer, hey, this market is incredibly hard right now. What you are navigating is genuinely difficult.
Basically validating their struggle.
Right? Telling them, you aren't failing, so let's figure out what's mathematically possible for you.
Acknowledging the difficulty removes the shame. I imagine a lot of these 38-year-old first-time buyers feel a deep, quiet sense of shame that they haven't achieved what their parents did at 29.
Removing that shame is how you earn a client for life. When you validate that the race is simply harder now, you stop being a salesperson and start being an ally.
Which leads perfectly into the massive paradigm shift the industry is facing. Because buyers are armed with all this fragmented internet research, and because they're facing such a brutal financial landscape, the role of the traditional real estate agent has to completely transform.
They can no longer survive as mere gatekeepers of MLS listings.
Exactly. They have to become teachers. And the good news is 90% of younger millennials still use an agent when they purchase a home.
That's a huge relief for the industry.
Right. So they haven't abandoned the profession entirely.
No, they do want help. But what they expect from that professional relationship is entirely different from what their parents expected. They want someone who can translate the industry jargon into plain, actionable English.
They want an agent who will explain what a terrifying 50-page inspection report actually means, rather than just saying, oh, it's fine.
Exactly.
And they want someone to explain what earnest money is before, sliding a piece of paper across the desk and demanding a massive check.
Take earnest money, for example. To a first-time buyer today, that sounds like a fake, old-timey phrase.
It really does. It sounds like something from a Charles Dickens novel.
Right, so they need an agent to stop the process and say, look, this is a good faith deposit, usually 1 to 3% of the home's purchase price.
Yeah.
That proves to the seller you are a serious buyer.
Okay.
It goes into an escrow account, which is just a neutral third-party holding account.
Yeah.
And the agent needs to explain exactly where that money goes and how you get it back if the deal falls through because of a bad inspection.
Because if you don't explain the mechanics of that, the buyer just thinks you are demanding a random $5,000 check for no reason.
Which immediately triggers their fear of being scammed.
It all comes back to transparency. And there's a fascinating warning in this guide regarding how highly experienced veteran agents often get this completely wrong.
Oh, this part is so crucial.
Right. The instinct for a veteran agent is to immediately establish credibility. They want to sit down and show off their expertise, their sales volume, how many homes they sold in the neighborhood last year.
They want to prove they are the apex predator of the local market.
Exactly. And with this specific generation, that approach is catastrophic.
It ruins their chances completely.
Wait, why does flexing your hard-earned expertise backfire so badly?
Because it centers the conversation on the agent, not the buyer. Imagine going on a first date, and the other person immediately pulls out their resume and starts reading their professional accolades aloud instead of asking how your day was.
Oh my gosh, I would walk right out of that date.
Right. It is profoundly off-putting. What this generation desperately needs first is to feel heard and protected. They do not need to be dazzled by your sales record. They need to know you understand their specific financial anxieties.
Okay, so what should they do instead?
The most powerful tool an agent has isn't a glossy presentation pitch. It's asking a simple question, like what part of this process feels most overwhelming to you right now?
And then actually listening to the answer without immediately pivoting to a sales solution.
Exactly.
Because the traditional salesmanship actually registers as a threat, and that extends to how agents present themselves digitally, too.
Well, for sure.
The guide talks heavily about rethinking what showing up looks like. We know Gen Z is doing their real estate research on TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit.
Yeah, that's where they live online.
But the guide makes a critical distinction. It says agents do not need to become superstar content creators with professional lighting and drone footage. So what are the mechanics of building digital trust for this demographic?
It comes down to two things: being digitally frictionless and being completely authentic. A polished, expensive marketing brochure means absolutely nothing if your mobile listing page is broken, slow, or hard to navigate on a smartphone.
You lose the lead before you even know they exist.
Exactly. What builds trust in the digital space for this demographic is unpolished authenticity. A short, honest, jargon-free video shot on a shaky iPhone where an agent just plainly explains how a home appraisal works and why it matters.
Right.
That will do far more to earn a Gen Z buyer's trust than a slick, heavily produced marketing campaign with dramatic music.
Because the slick marketing campaign looks like the casino from our intro. It looks like a trap.
Exactly. It looks institutional, and institutions are what they distrust. This ties directly into how this generation markets for you.
Oh, word of mouth.
Yes, younger millennials and Gen Z heavily rely on peer referrals. They inherently distrust institutional advertising, billboards, or, bus benches.
Right.
But if they feel genuinely educated and protected by an agent, if that agent acted as a teacher rather than a salesperson, they will enthusiastically refer that agent to every single person in their social circle.
Education is the new marketing.
Education is the new marketing, absolutely.
So to bring this all together for you listening, whether you are a prospective buyer trying to navigate this chaotic market,
or an agent trying to figure out why your old closing tactics are suddenly failing.
right, or just someone fascinated by how generational shifts reshape massive sectors of the economy, the core message from this data is profound. The response to all this anxiety, all this frantic AI research, and all this financial pressure isn't a new strategic sales funnel.
No.
That's just being transparently human.
It really comes down to a higher standard of care. Bridging the trust gap requires genuine patience, explaining the mechanics of the process in plain language, and prioritizing the buyer's actual understanding over the quarterly conversion metrics.
The professionals who embrace that teacher mindset are the ones who will survive the shift. Younger generations are forcing a deeply entrenched, multi-billion-dollar industry to abandon decades of traditional salesmanship in favor of transparent education and empathy.
It's a massive shift.
It is, and it makes you wonder. As millennials and Gen Z gain even more purchasing power and societal influence in the coming years, what other massive traditional industries are next in line for this exact same trust gap reckoning?
Oh, that's a great question.
Will we see this happen in healthcare, where patients demand doctors explain the exact mechanics of billing before a procedure, auto sales, higher education?
It's entirely possible.
It really brings us back to that casino we talked about at the beginning. Maybe the house doesn't always have to win as long as someone is finally willing to walk you through exactly how the odds are calculated before you sit down at the table.
A very compelling question to consider as these demographics age into greater economic power.
Something to mull over until next time. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking for the why behind the data, and we will catch you on the next one.